Is there anything within the government of national unity which could maybe change that or turn that around so that America starts supporting us rather than punishing us?
Trump wants to stop South Africa from being a connector country for the exports, for example, of Mercedes-Benz out of East London, because many other countries have brought jobs to South Africa by making use of South Africa's AGOA status internationally.
Because BMW alone has to the tune of 50% of its products exported to the US market, all right? And Alec Hogg argues that that's to the tune of 23 billion rand worth of export.
President Trump is dead opposed to any race-based legislation in South Africa and any indication of the persecution of minorities. That's why we were appalled by the Constitutional Court judgment that said kill the Boer is not hate speech. Of course, it is hate speech.
Guys, so with the ongoing trade wars now between the USA and China, we know that the USA actually has, I think, to the total of 145% tariffs. It actually feels like a movie. 145% on tariffs, that's Chinese imports to the US. And China then slaps the US, I think this morning, with 125% tariffs on US imports to China. So the whole world has been unleashed on the scale of, trade wars that I think hasn't really been seen in a long time in history. And there's a long recession, I suspect, coming on the entire world, all right? And now, so when we think about China and South Africa, we know that China and South Africa are actually members of BRICS, all right? And so how that whole trade war thing actually affects South Africa is, for me, really important, because we actually had this inkling that probably there could be some assistance that would be coming from China immediately the US extracted its USAID and other forms of assistance from South Africa. But now the US is actually slapping China with as high as 145% tariffs. You see, many analysts have actually argued that the Chinese are really tough, the Chinese are really resilient, and probably they could withstand this for a long time. But I don't really understand how 145% tariffs is quite high. I know this is also going to strike the US as well. 125% tariffs, the US consumer is going to feel this cost and all of that. But now when we come back to South Africa, coupled with Minister Godongwana's 0.5% tax hike, so I think a total of 15.5% tax hike on value-added tax in South Africa, and knowing fully well that I think in this discussion, Alec Hogg and Helen Zille actually argued that BMW and I think Mercedes might be pulling out of South Africa because BMW alone has to the tune of 50% of its products exported to the US market, all right? And Alec Hogg argues that that's to the tune of 23 billion rand worth of export. All right, so that's really huge, guys, and I know that this is going to really impact the decisions by BMW and Mercedes. I don't know if probably they might want to leave South Africa now, because according to Helen Zille, and I'll be playing this in this video, I don't want this to be too long. Helen Zille argues that the AGOA agreement pulled in a lot of investors to South Africa to be able to instrumentalize the AGOA assistance or the AGOA right to tariff-free exports to South Africa. And this has really helped to the US, and this has helped South Africa a lot, brought a lot of jobs. I think even maybe some other Australian or different countries have actually had to station their processes in South Africa so that they may be able to enjoy that AGOA benefit, all right? But now with AGOA really on the line, and the tariffs that have been slammed on South Africa's auto industry, I think also the general flat rate of 10% that Donald Trump actually now has placed on the whole world, now that he has given a 90-day pause. I think there's a 90-day pause on the global tariffs. I really don't know how this really would impact South Africa. And now to cap this all up, Helen Zille is now in this video arguing and telling us that South Africa's economy is not important to the US. There's nothing really, significant about South Africa to the US. Donald Trump for South Africa is mostly important, is mostly interested about minority rights in South Africa. For the US, probably in the next 4 years of Donald Trump's regime, this would be most important. And for me, it's really interesting how this whole thing, works. And then also to have a South Africa that hasn't been productive for a long time, having been in the center of this whole quagmire of trade wars, bro, especially hoping with the hope that, China's large economy, especially in BRICS, would have been a major source of assistance to China, to South Africa, to prop up South Africa's possibly doom gloom scenario. Now, I think that this is going to be something that South Africans need to hear and listen and understand so that they can prepare for the long term in case of a long-term recession, because a global recession on the wall, I think, would be much more significant in African countries, Nigeria, everywhere, and South Africa is not escaping. Let's quickly listen to Helen Zille and like break this down for us to understand, so that we can understand how we can make our next moves, and share your thoughts in the comments.
It's almost like the whole world is on a knife edge, and South Africa even more so. But where are we right now? Where is South Africa, and should we be worried?
Well, obviously, Trump's tariffs are having an enormously negative effect on us. Trump wants to stop South Africa from being a connector country for the exports, for example, of Mercedes-Benz out of East London, because many other countries have brought jobs to South Africa by making use of South Africa's AGOA status internationally. And that has helped us enormously by creating a lot of jobs. By slapping such high tariffs on us, I think if I recall, it's 25% on South Africa. It makes it very, very difficult to export our goods or any other goods from people who've invested and built factories in South Africa to the United States of America. And that is going to have an enormously negative impact on our economy. So we're bracing for that. And we've seen the whole world reacting to President Trump's announcements, especially in the last 24 hours.
You have sent a delegation to Washington, and we now hear that a business delegation has been there as well and returned. Is there any brightness in the gloom?
President Trump is dead opposed to any race-based legislation in South Africa and any indication of the persecution of minorities. Now, we also don't think that race-based legislation is helpful in a supposedly non-racial democracy. And we also are completely opposed to discrimination and oppression on minorities. That's why we were appalled by the Constitutional Court judgment that said, kill the Boer is not hate speech. Of course, it is hate speech in our opinion, and I think in most people's opinion. So those kinds of things are worrying. But we don't believe that all South Africans should be punished. And the people who are going to be the most profoundly punished are the people who are going to lose their jobs in car factories, are the people who are going to lose their jobs on the farms of the Western Cape and other places, because we, for example, export lots of citrus to the United States and other agricultural products. So the workers are going to be hardest hit by these measures, and this is the tragedy for South Africa.
Yeah, BMW, 50% of their production in South Africa goes into the US market. And of course, they'll be priced out of it immediately. And the numbers, I did some work on them the other day, were 23 billion rands worth of exports. So this is a very serious thing. But on the other hand, those who have got connections into Donald Trump and co say he can be a very good friend. We haven't even explored that opportunity yet. Is there anything within the government of national unity, we'll talk about that in a moment, which could maybe change that or turn that around so that America starts supporting us rather than punishing us?
We have to box very smart, because we are not important to America. Minority rights are massively important to Donald Trump in South Africa. But our economy is of absolutely no significance in the American scheme of things. And so we should not think that we can retaliate at an economic level that'll give the USA a bloody nose. We have to box very, very smart here. And boxing smart would be, for example, not to increase tariffs to impossible levels, but to reduce tariffs, especially on products that we don't make in South Africa, to encourage many people to invest in South Africa so that we can start making up for a lot of the trade we will lose to America. So here we've got to do some very serious calculations, no knee-jerk reactions, proper economic analysis, thinking over the long term, because that is what it'll take.
Cool heads. What about
Cool
the
heads.
GNU? GNU, at the moment, we're told that the DA is moving out or pulling out. There's all kinds of heat around the conversation after the budget. Are you able to bring some cool heads into that discussion as well?
We always have cool heads. We went into the GNU in order to share power. That is what coalitions do all over the world, Alec. No one goes into a coalition to be sucked up by the larger party and prop them up because they didn't get enough votes in the election. And in countries where coalitions work, the bigger party and the smaller party accept that a coalition means power sharing. The ANC sadly does not accept that. As they've often said, this is just a tactical move until they get above 50% again. They don't understand that the DA is in the GNU to share power, but most critically to get South Africa's economy back on a growth path so that we can create more jobs. And to get growth, you have to have investment. And we have to make sure that we do everything possible to make South Africa an investor-friendly destination. And the DA sees crucial economic reforms as being at the heart of that quest. By the end of the GNU, if we are to make any impact at all for the betterment of South Africa, we have to be able to say in 2029, well, we brought down unemployment by X percentage. We created X thousand new jobs, etc., etc. And then our participation in government would have been worth it.